Hi, this is Chris Gomez, and I blog at chrisgomez.com. Today I want to talk to you about ASP.NET 5, and I want to talk to you about starting completely from scratch. So what do I mean, starting completely from scratch? Well, first of all, ASP.NET 5 is being developed in the open, and here is the GitHub repository at github.com/aspnet/home. And if you scroll down and you read a little bit of the README file here, it tells you that you can get started on Windows by installing Visual Studio 2015. And Visual Studio 2015 is released now. So if you have access to that, that's a great way to get started. Or you can go get Visual Studio 2015 Community Edition, which is free. But I'm intrigued about the idea that you can use DNVM to get .NET, ASP.NET, running without Visual Studio. So you start off with a utility called DNVM. So what I decided to do was walk through that process of starting completely from scratch and being able to build and run an ASP.NET 5 project, including getting code from an ASP.NET Generator that would be a lot like you would use if you were doing File New Project. So what I have here is a Windows 8.1 virtual machine that's just been installed, and very little has been added to it since the install. If you take a look, there really isn't a whole lot here. The only thing that I've done is I made myself a special administrator command prompt that's nice and big so that we can all see the font very easily in this recording. But when you do things from the command line, how will you bring it up? Well, what you should do is at the start screen, just go ahead and type CMD, and you'll see the command prompt is one of the very first things that comes up. You can right click it and pick Run as Administrator, and that'll go ahead and put you in the same place I am so that you can install these utilities and get everything going to code and deploy ASP.NET 5 all from the command line on an operating system that doesn't even have Visual Studio installed. So getting started, we can just follow the instructions on the README. So you might ask yourself in a second, if we're just going to follow these instructions, what do you need me for? But you'll see that the instructions tell you how to get DNVM on, the .NET version manager. And then it moves on to how to do the same on OS X using Brew, and how to do the same on Linux by going to a different document. It doesn't really tell you much more about how to get going. So what I thought is I would put together one single video where we go from beginning to end. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing to get started is let's follow their instructions right here to use either this command line at a command prompt, or you can open PowerShell and essentially put in the same command line without the code here that says, hey, go run this in PowerShell at an unrestricted level. So we're already ready to do that here at this command line, and you'll see this is what it looks like. It executes PowerShell. It says that the execution policy for this script is unrestricted, and the command that it runs is going to go out to some user content on GitHub and go grab a PowerShell script and execute it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here, and it's going to get started downloading DNVM. That's the .NET version manager that we will then use to install versions of DNX. And it's done. What we have now is we have a new command line utility called DNVM, and you access it just simply by typing DNVM. So let's go ahead and hit enter on that here. But wait a second, it says that DNVM is not recognized. Hold on. What if we say, where did it get installed? Oh gosh, I couldn't find it. Well, it turns out that while this PowerShell script did go ahead and install DNVM and go ahead and add to the path the locations that we need, that didn't get added to this command prompt. So it installed DNVM here in my profile at an additional folder called .dnx bin. We could actually go take a look at that. Let's mark it, and we'll go look at it in Explorer. Opening up File Explorer and just simply pasting in that address, we can see that there's a command in a PowerShell script ready to run DNVM for us at the command line. So the .NET Version Manager is installed and ready to go. But I'm going to have to exit this command prompt and restart it. And you'll probably find you have to do the same thing. So making sure that I run as administrator again, we are back. And if I type DNVM now, I do indeed get the .NET Version Manager. Well, nowadays, everybody's command line tools have to have some pretty ASCII art, and so we have that for DNVM. And what we also have here is it shows us that by default it put in a default stable feed at NuGet.org and an unstable feed if you want to live on the bleeding edge of this stuff at myget.org. Not that is really all that important right now. What we need to do next is get DNX, the .NET execution environment, on this machine. And as you can see, if we use the DNVM command list to see which runtimes are on the machine, we get nothing. We get just this plain old just return back to our command line because there aren't any .NET execution engines installed on here. And that's one small difference in ASP.NET 5 is these are isolated .NET execution engines that run both on the CLR, the full CLR, full .NET framework that we're used to deploying today to a server, but also this newer core CLR, a cloud optimized runtime that you could package all in an isolated environment. You could put it on a USB stick where it's got everything you want on it. It's got .NET and everything, and you could go put that out on a server. And you could have different versions of those core CLRs on the same server. But we don't have any .NET execution environment. So in order to get the latest and greatest, you might have already spotted the upgrade command. And if you use the upgrade command, there's actually quite a few choices here. There's more than just running DNVM upgrade. You can also install different processor architectures. You can also say, which versions you want to install. There's quite a bit of power here, but if you simply just say DNVM upgrade, then what DNVM is going to do is go out and get the latest version of DNX, get it installed on your machine, and you're ready to go. So here it is pulling DNX CLR Win x86 Beta 5, and Beta 5 was just released pretty much alongside the Visual Studio 2015 RTM release. So it is the latest as of today when this recording was made. It goes ahead and adds a few folders to the process path so that we're now going to be able to type DNX from the command line, and we're going to be able to use the commands that that execution environment gives us. And so when that's done, we can run DNVM list again, and we'll see something different from what we saw last time. And here it is. We have one runtime installed, the Beta 5 runtime for the full CLR, running on Windows. That's awesome. We could even type DNX, and we would see that that would show up. And here it is, basically saying like, hey, you can check out, version information for DNX, or you can launch applications from here. But for right now, we're not really ready to begin doing that because we don't have any code. We don't have a project. We don't have a file new project. And since we don't have Visual Studio, how are we going to file new project? Well, there is actually an ASP.NET generator that is based on one of the standard generating platforms on the web. It is probably the scaffolding tool for today's web apps, and that's Yeoman. So here's yeoman.io, and yeoman.io tells you, well, you can install me using npm, the Node Package Manager. Well, on this base machine, I don't have npm yet. I don't even have Node. So one thing you could do is you could go to the Node.js website and you could install Node.js. That's one way to go. The other option, which is something I'd like to do, is I like to use Chocolaty. So Chocolaty is a machine package manager that's a little bit like apt-get or yum or brew, except that it's for Windows. And so it turns out all you have to do is click this first copy icon here, and it's going to put on my clipboard this command line that's going to do pretty much something very similar to what the dnvm install did, except it's going to install Chocolaty. So coming back to our command prompt, we're going to install Chocolaty real quick because that's going to make it super easy for us to install Node. So we'll go ahead and let this run. So when Chocolaty's done installing, it does warn you that you might need to restart the command prompt, just like we were talking about earlier with dnvm. I'm going to take a quick peek on the path, and I am going to see that the Chocolaty executable is in the path, along with dnx, the runtimes, and also, so access to dnvm is in there as well. So it turns out that I should be okay to just go ahead and install Node.js from the command line just by saying choco install Node.js. And I'm going to go ahead and let that start going. And then Node.js is ready, and we can tell that pretty easily just by typing node -v. But just like the problem we had with the NVM, even though the path was updated, it's not going to be updated in this command prompt. So let's go ahead and exit. Let's come back in, run as administrator again, and this time check the node version. Pretty up-to-date version of Node. Point release, if I recall correctly. And now npm is also installed. Pretty up-to-date version of that as well. And so now we can go back and we can install Yeoman, which is going to be our file new project-like tool for creating ASP.NET 5 projects. So pretty simple looking command, right? npm install -go. And if you're new to npm, then you might be wondering what's the -g. It means to install this globally. And the only thing that means is that this command yo, which is how you run yeoman, is going to be put in the path in such a way that you'll be able to run yo from anywhere on your system. And this is really useful for packages that are you might think of them as meta packages or packages that maybe install other packages or retrieve things for you. So this goes for tools like Yeoman, Bower, Grunt, Gulp, and so on. Bower being a client-side package manager, Gulp being a task runner. These are things that you're going to want to run from all over your system. Now, if you use npm to go get the latest version of jQuery, you probably would not use the -g parameter because your intent there is just to put it into your project. So you wouldn't necessarily care that it was accessible all over your system. So Yeoman's installed. That's what all of this gobbledygook on the screen means. If I type yo, just because, just to see that it's running, it does run, and it says, well, hey, you know what, I want to anonymously report usage statistics, and I'm going to go ahead and hit enter for yes. And basically then what it does here is it says, well, do you want to run a generator, install a generator? And I actually don't need to do any of that right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and let Yeoman exit. And so Yeoman is gone, and the next question is okay, well, you said that I had to use Yeoman to do a file new project for ASP.NET 5. Yeah, but Yeoman itself does not have the, hundreds or thousands of code generators that might be used for all kinds of different platforms. For that, we're going to turn to a generator project called Generator-Asp Net, and the easiest way to install that is once again with npm. So we're going to install Generator-Asp Net. So the generator is installed, and that means that we're actually ready, finally, to create a new project and have some code that we can execute using this new .NET execution runtime that's running all in the command line without Visual Studio or IIS or ISS Express or anything like that. When you run yeoman to generate code, it's going to create a subfolder in the folder that you're currently in, and I actually don't really want it to be here in Windows System 32, so I'm going to back out of here and create a new folder that we'll store source in, and then let's switch to it. So here we are in the source folder. This is perfect. This is exactly where I want to be, and all I have to do is type yo ASP.NET. What this does is it says run yeoman and use the ASP Net Generator that we just downloaded and installed. The cool looking ASCII art for yeoman comes up, and kind of like being in Visual Studio, we get to pick what type of application we want to create. Do we want an empty application, a console application, maybe a nice web sample, a web API sample, a Nancy sample using the open source ASP.NET library Nancy. I'm going to choose this one here, the web application simple, because it brings up something that's working and fully functioning, but it doesn't have the baggage of logins and authorization. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here. The next question that it's going to ask me is, well, what do you want to call it? And this is going to be the name of the folder and the name of the application, and so I can type in anything I like here. I think I'm going to go ahead and use my initials and call it web application simple and hit enter. And there it is. It's created CG Web Application Simple, and it even gives me a little bit of help on how to get things going. It says, you know, you can just move over to that folder, and then you're going to want to restore NuGet packages just like you might in any ASP.NET new project, and then you can go ahead and run it. Now this is a web project, and we're on Windows, so we will be using dnx.web. Kestrel is the current name of the web server that's being developed cross-platform for OS X and Linux. But first we're going to need to do DNU restore. Now we haven't talked about DNU. Let's go ahead and see what that is. And turns out it's another command line utility. It's the .NET development utility. It does quite a few different things. That's probably why it's just called a utility. For one thing, it will restore missing NuGet packages in a project with DNU restore. It would also allow you to take the project and build NuGet packages for what you're building now. So it's kind of like a quick way to turn your project into something that you can use with the NuGet feeds. Another feature that it has is DNU Publish, which allows you to pack up your application, get it ready for deployment. You might see some members of the ASP.NET team on different videos use that command to put their project on a USB stick and go take it over to another machine, even on a different platform. So, you know, as it said, we need to do DNU restore. So let's go ahead and get that started. And it's going to go out, it's going to look at this project and restore the NuGet packages that this project needs in order to run. So some of this might look a little familiar to you if you're used to using NuGet in Visual Studio, but this is all happening at the command line. We don't have Visual Studio or anything else installed on this machine. It may seem like we've done a lot, but really we've sat at command line on a brand new instance of a virtual machine. This could be on your own machine, and you know, we should be ready to go just by typing dnx.web. Well, okay, so what does this mean? Well, when you want to run an application in DNX, first you tell it where on the file system to find it, and since it's in this folder, c/source/cg web application simple, the dot means just look right here, and web means run the web command. Okay, so what is the web command? Well, let's get a little old-fashioned here and type the project JSON. If you were in Linux, you might use cat, but we'll take a quick look. In the project JSON itself, you specify the commands. And since we're on Windows, we're going to use this command web that's going to launch the server by using the Microsoft ASP Net Server Web Listener DLL. And it's going to launch that out on port 5000. So what I'm going to do real quick, just to show there's really nothing up our sleeves, is let's go try to reach localhost 5000. And it's going to circle for a little bit and say the page can't be displayed. There is nothing listening on this port locally. So now let's go ahead and start .NET Execution Engine in the local folder. It says it started and it's listening at localhost 5000. If you watch down here at the bottom, if you can see at the bottom of the command prompt, when I refresh this page, the server posts a quick little comment that it received a request, and here we see our CG Web Application Simple project. I've just noticed that I misspelled web application, which is probably for the best because you can see that I misspelled it in yeoman. I got myself a folder without the C, and that variable was also used in the Visual Studio sample project here. So this is an ASP.NET 5 project. It's an MVC, simple MVC app with just a home, about, and a contact page. I kept it real simple and chose not to use authentication or anything, but the important part is that there's no Visual Studio on this machine. This isn't running an IIS. This isn't running an IIS Express. You can still do all those things, and there's no reason why you wouldn't want to if that's the environment you want to go to. But this is the first step in getting us towards a cross-platform ASP.NET 5. And in future videos, I can't wait to show you how you can use various text editors, lightweight text editors, to edit this, to deploy it, and then we'll go ahead and show some example work in Linux operating systems and deploying to different machines. We'll take a look at all that stuff. Should be a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed this. Please make sure if you have any questions, go ahead and comment. You're going to see that links to everything that I showed up here in Internet Explorer will be available down in the description of this video. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to comment, don't be afraid to like, and if you want to see more, then don't be afraid to subscribe. I can't wait to see you next time. Goodbye.